Cape Ann Climate Coalition, which Tom will be talking about today as part of our Rockport Earth Day 2020 events that will be running through the rest of the year 2020. Okay, I also know Tom through the Gloucester Area Astronomy Club. He attends the meetings fairly often. And so like many of us, we have many hats, are involved in the community in many ways. Okay, Tom, the place is yours.
Thank you, Bill. Well, welcome everyone. So this is about the Cape Ann Climate Coalition, and my name's Tom Mikus, and full disclosure, I worked for Exxon for 5 years and Shell Oil for 30 years. So I'm here to pay for my sins, I guess. The nice part of that is they do employ, retiree matching. So if I contribute to any environmental organizations, Shell matches it 1-for-1. So that's the good thing. So what is the Cape Ann Climate Coalition? We'll talk about what has it done, what's it doing now, and then how could one participate? So we started this last year. It's a coalition of organizations and individuals that are taking action to mitigate or adapt to climate change on Cape Ann. We're not just a webinar series. We're not here just to be seen. We're here to take action. So what's the structure of this? I guess in terms of financial legal senses, it's under the wing of Town Green 2025, which is part of Gloucester Meeting House, and that gives us some 501c3 coverage. There's an organizing committee, which is pretty loosely defined as whoever comes to the meetings. We have what we call big meetings. Started out with 150 something, I think, last September. And of course, we're not meeting anymore in person. We're meeting on Zoom, and it's more or less a quarterly schedule. And we've set up working groups to actually do the actions that we were talking about, the reason for the coalition to exist. And here's an example pre-COVID, where you see Mayor Safatia with Rockport's Tom Barrett to the right, and on the far right, you see the back of Hank Betts. So this is the kind of coalition we were trying to build in the beginning with government and individuals and organizations. And you can see Joe Parisi's table was having a little more fun. People laughing there. That's how we got started last September. So what have we done? I think I'd start out with some climate change information from previous big meetings. I suspect that most of us on this Zoom meeting are believers in climate change, but let's just go through some background that was sort of foundational for what we did. So for the September meeting, showing Cape Ann in the background, we showed a few foundational slides. Here's the IPCC report warning. Need to reduce emissions by as much as 45% by 2030. And then they said, you really want to limit warning to 1.5 C, and we're not on track for that. There's powerful opposition to it. There's fossil fuel power plants scheduled to open as we're facing a climate catastrophe, and those fossil fuel plants emit greenhouse gases. And fossil fuel companies have some money behind this. They could lose $2.2 trillion by 2030 if carbon cuts are implemented by them. That's some strong motivation. Here's sort of a scoping visual representation about how daunting the job is. The total amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is, I guess it's a little higher than 420 ppm by now. That's the outer beige on my screen. Circle. The manageable amount, kind of accepted by science in general, 350, and that's the origin of the 350.org organization. So that's where we want to get back down to, if we can at all. And that little green circle is how much we add per year. So we keep inflating the beige circle by the amount in that green circle and it keeps getting bigger than the blue circle. That's the bad news. So here's a little information about why 1.5 degrees C is the new number. They say there's a so-called catastrophe at 2 degrees C with world food security and rising sea level and feedback loops. And we know recently we're seeing a lot more of those. For example, the wildfires out west. Those are largely encouraged, at least, made larger, made more frequent, made worse by climate change. And in return for that, the burning trees are emitting a lot of greenhouse gases. So that's a positive feedback loop. Not a good thing. So somebody has to do this. And here's a quote from Robert Swan: "Greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. We need better ambition. We need to fight, but we're locked in a difficult scenario. Everybody needs action without delay." So there's some motivation. And we ramped it up a little bit in December from some new information that came out in November about cutting greenhouse gases or facing catastrophe. There was a new report from the UN, and unprecedented changes in the ocean and cryosphere due to global warming. This shows a glacier. I suspect that's Greenland. The glacier going into the water and therefore doing a lot of things like changing the salinity, raising the water level, and changing the reflectivity of the land that will soon be exposed. So it's already happening. This is not like a prediction, and it's accelerating, and it's not stopping. That's the key message. This is not something that looks like it's going to kind of reach an asymptotic limit very soon. It continues on and it's accelerating. That's this hockey stick exponential curve that you probably heard about. So polar regions are going to be different in the future, and they already are quite different, especially in the Arctic, where the sea ice is decreasing rapidly every year. Poor polar bears are trying to look for somewhere to hang out. But action quickly can limit the worst impacts. We've already had impacts. It's happening, but we can keep it from getting worse than necessary. So getting back to the Climate Coalition, what have we done? One thing we did this year when we went into our COVID mode is we had a series of webinars. We had Ken Kimmel from the Union of Concerned Scientists, talking about some issues from the scientific perspective. Larry talked about energy aggregation, I think it was. Natasha Lamb was talking about the effects of investment and who one invests in, like for example, buying stocks or using banks or specific credit cards, where that money goes. A lot of it goes to funding fossil fuel projects. And then Denny Dart talked to us about, I believe that was about our personal carbon footprint and what we can do to reduce it. I guess the good news is we're not traveling as much, so that's one thing. We've had at the big meetings that we've had last year in person and going into this year over Zoom, we've had some keynote speakers at those, and I'm not going to list them here. They're on the website. And we formed 7 working groups. So let me talk about those a bit later. Another thing coming up next week, I think, we've got a locally interviewed session with Bill McKibben. That webinar information is on the Town Green website. The big meeting is now going to be on October 8th. That's a Thursday, and I'll show you how to get in on that if it's interesting to you. So the 7 working groups I'm listing here are renewable energy, energy efficiency, carbon capture and sequestration, vision, policy and legislation, climate arts, care of creation, and community building and education. And I'll talk about these individually as I go on. But wanted you to see what has formed, and these were sort of organically formed from the first meeting. There was a lot of flip charting and collecting of ideas. And we have an open opportunity to put new groups into action. So here's about a renewable energy group. And I'm not taking credit for any of this. I'm not taking blame for any of it. These are what the groups wrote up, and I only lightly edited to kind of fit on the screen. So it's working with municipalities. That's primarily the 4 Cape Ann municipalities, but in terms of a community choice aggregation, it will extend. Perhaps Beverly and Salem would want to join in. The more communities we get to join, the better deal we can get, because what you do is you go out to bid for purchasing your electric power for everyone in the town. And that way you can get, we hope, lower energy prices and also increased content of green renewable energy. So Gloucester's been doing this for a couple of years, I think, and they are doing pretty well with it. They're paying less and using 5% additional renewable content above the legally required amount. And if you want to opt in to get 100%, you can do that. And so we hope to have a similar or better contract available for Cape Ann communities probably next year. If not, then it'd be early the following year. So that's renewable energy. And just to break up the text a little bit, Gloucester's already doing, Cape Ann is already doing some renewable energy. Here's one of the wind turbines. And here's a local example. This is Bill Rule's house here on Marmion Way. He's got solar panels on both sides of his roof. And he's an architect, so he knows how to do that. Us dumb engineers would only put it on one side. So there's your example, some local solar energy. Next group I want to talk about is Energy Efficiency Group. And their issues are investigating updates to the building code for efficiency standards. And these sort of cascade down to the municipalities being required to follow them. I might note that I think all the communities of Cape Ann are now green communities, which means they are following the stretch code, which has more stringent efficiency standards for structures. So this would trickle down to be an improvement on that, and we would all get the benefit of it. And also looking how to get some electric vehicles, starting with CACC. And I'm not sure how far that's gotten. The COVID has kind of put a damper on some of this, but just to give you a little image break here, we're already on Cape Ann doing some public electric vehicle encouragement. You may have seen this one in front of Gloucester City Hall. And there's two plug-in places. I thought they wouldn't run them at night, so I parked there at 7 p.m. for an evening meeting, and it turned out Mayor Safati was coming out. She yelled at me, "Oh yeah, we use those at night." Okay, so I moved. And you may not have seen this one a little further from us in Manchester. There's a public parking station, charging station near their municipal building. Okay, another working group, carbon capture and sequestration. We wanted to go by the colors, different colors of carbon. So we called one green. This is a biomass. And I'll mention our Rockport tree policy a little later. There is already a tree policy with Manchester, and that is, I guess, in the mood of getting some revisions. And what we learned there will bring some renewed emphasis to Gloucester, which already has a tree warden, but kind of dormant as I understand it. Then there's blue carbon, ocean biomass. So we haven't done much with this, but that could recognize the potential for marsh and ocean sequestration of carbon. And one of the things we could do is to propose moorings that are designed not to scour the eelgrass as the standard mooring does as the chain swings around. White carbon, plastic waste. I think we've already done this a little bit. Some shrink wrap for boats is incinerated, and I think Sharon helped us with this to identify a local recycler and notify the municipalities to make sure that they were able to put the shrink wrap from the boats into a better recycle instead of letting it go to the incinerators. And in terms of awareness, this is something we'd like to do. Haven't gotten any any progress yet, but publicly demonstrate past and future high water events. And there have been some fairly high water places in different communities, and putting marks on poles or on buildings as to how high the water's gotten in the past will help us generate some awareness there. So picking up on the green carbon in trees, I'll give you a bad example. This is what Marblehead does with their Christmas trees. Right back up into the air, all that carbon goes. So all the sequestered carbon that was in the tree is no longer sequestered. We can learn from bad examples. Okay, the Vision Policy and Legislation Group kind of has 3 subgroups. They're quite active. Vision Group is doing a Harvard study. I'll mention that a little bit later on. Policy Group has 3 topics: waste innovation, managed retreat, and divestment in fossil fuel companies, which was the subject of one of our webinars. And waste innovation, I think, was also a subject of a seminar that Sharon gave. The legislator group is actively advocating for legislation at the state level, things that would affect Cape Ann. And they did a survey asking to rate the different focus areas to help steer this. Advocating in the Gloucester level to support the Futures Act at the state level. So that's getting the city to support legislation at the state level. And that last one is about learning to help with the process and writing an outline of how one can influence the legislation going through. So picking up on the managed retreat, here's an example I would like to show you. Rockport's Long Beach. This is at high tide in April. There is no storm, there is no wave, there is no storm surge at all. This is just high tide. And the last 5 houses on this street cannot be reached by the road. There's no other road access. So here is my poster child for the need for managed retreat. The Climate Arts Group has a charter of integrating arts and helping with what it can do for action on climate change. They were hoping to have a climate arts festival and can't realistically do that this year, hoping to do it next year. And what they've done is to, I had updated this slide, unable to present it to you yet, but that was showing that there's an artist that has been working on this, and they are promoting the work of this artist. And I'll show you some examples here. This is Elaine McRae Starrett. Some of her paintings, these are about 6 feet high, I understand. And photography by Les Bartlett, giving him credit here. And you see flowers growing, but in the background you see some not so environmental backgrounds, some dumps and some bulldozers running around. And a few more examples of that. Pretty striking. So promoting this art would be one thing that the this working group can do. There's the final one I wanted to show. Particularly striking to see what the landscape looks like as it's being torn up. So the Care of Creation group focuses on communities of faith. They held some education programs about electrification, climate crisis, efficiency, and sponsored a webinar where Sharon did waste reduction. And I believe this is from Sharon's webinar. I didn't see it, but I snagged this off the website. So giving you some feel for what's in your trash. Well, you know what's in your trash. This is what's in your town's trash. Mm. So the Community Building and Education Group has built a Facebook page. I'll try to hurry up here in case we get cut off. And has informational pages to do sustainable food. And here's an example of sustainable food truck in Gloucester with local seafood on the Fisherman's Wharf, or base there, I guess. So here's a couple of highlights from Rockport, since that's where many of us are right now. We are working toward this electricity aggregation with the other communities of the Cape and further down the North Shore. We are participating in the Harvard study, and that's a whole webinar of its own. I don't want to start into that too much now. There's a tree policy to be approved by the Board of Selectmen. That's kind of on hold with COVID, but I hope that can go forward before too long to reinitiate the tree warden and other things. And the carbon emission footprint calculation for all of Rockport, and each of the Cape Ann communities will be doing this. And I've got folks from the Green Community Task Force helping do some of the publicly available data. And it turns out that there's a component of this from waste, which is not so much publicly available, and Sharon is helping with that.